Welcome to the Boardroom Podcast, presented by the Political Action Committee, People for a Better DeSoto County, with your hosts, Chad and Ben. We hope to give you an informative look into local government by having a healthy discussion about city issues, interview a few friends, and have a little fun.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Boardroom Podcast. I'm Chad Wicker.
And I'm Ben Piper.
And we're coming from, my wife told me to quit saying live from the heart of Ward 4, so we're just going to say the Shelby Row Studios here at the Caffey Place building in the city of Hernando on a great Friday morning. This show will be out on Monday, but right now it's Friday. And Ben, you want to talk about he's a tall statured guy anyway, but I think probably our most prominent guest we've had so far. What do you think?
Yeah, we have Lieutenant Governor Delbert Hosemann joining us. He's in the middle of a race for the Republican nomination for Lieutenant Governor with Chris McDaniel. So we'll have Lieutenant Governor Hosemann on.
Is there elections going on?
There's elections going on, apparently. That's what all these signs are around town.
Whoa.
Yeah, that's what all these signs are about. But we will have Lieutenant Governor Hosemann on this episode, and then in a future episode, we will have State Senator Chris McDaniel, who is his opponent in the Republican primary coming up in August. So you'll get to hear from both of them.
He's a state senator, I believe, from Jones Forest area down there.
Yeah, Ellisville.
That's right.
Yeah, I think it's Jones County Junior College is down there. That's where that is. So
sure.
Just a rural Pine Belt area of the state. But we have Lieutenant Governor Hosemann joining us. We will be discussing what he's done the last 4 years. Does he deserve another 4 years as Lieutenant Governor? Asking him some questions.
That sounds like a headline. Does he deserve another 4 years? Man?
I'm just saying. That's what the voters have to decide.
That's right.
He does have a challenger, Chris McDaniel. We'll have him on, like I said, a couple weeks from now, and you'll get to hear from both of them.
I think something is too. I guess we may be asking this, but the Lieutenant Governor position is very powerful in the state of Mississippi. Not only do you run the state legislature, the Senate, you also make several appointments throughout the state on different boards, and so that's, some would argue, even more powerful than the governor, the lieutenant governor. So it's a very, very prominent position, very important to our state, and so we're glad to have him on and talk about his record. Then
you decide the legislative agenda of the state.
Absolutely. In the Senate side, you run the Senate, and you also have some executive power because, again, you appoint different various committees throughout the state, and then you're the governor when the governor's out of the state. So.
Well, let's before we get to Lieutenant Governor Hosemann, we are going to talk a little bit about our board meeting.
It's a long meeting, man.
Yeah, I think the board meeting was pretty short this week, just coming off of a holiday, coming off of our Mississippi Municipal League training and conference that we went to down in Biloxi.
Talk about a second about that.
Yeah, we certainly can talk about that. So the Board of Aldermen and the mayor, most of the Board of Aldermen, there's a couple folks that had some work conflicts, couldn't make it.
Sure.
But the Board of Aldermen and the mayor went down to Biloxi for the Mississippi Municipal League conference the last week in June. Essentially, it offers you some courses and training that you can take to become a certified municipal official. And Chad Wicker, Natalie Lynch, and Beth Roan Ross all received their certificate to be certified municipal officials this year. So congrats to them, and they're putting in the hard work to get trained up. I'm going to be there next year.
Yeah,
I'm getting there. I'm getting there, folks. You know, I'm not a good class taker, I guess.
Well, you're not able to attend the midwinter conference because of childcare issues, and so we kind of got a head start on you from that. So it's no.
I'm catching up. I'm getting there.
Ben, I did get a text last night. I believe Notting Hill is getting paved this week, right?
Notting Hill subdivision is getting some paving on the backside of there in Ward 6. So if you live on Notting Hill,
all the roads
south,
in there, there's one road I think it's not getting paved.
The main entry road is not getting paved this year. I hope that it will be next year. It's up to the rest of the board. So Chad, you got to vote for that. Come on now.
If you want me to get something done, you just let me know. Okay?
Oh, okay. That's how it is. All right. I see how it is. All right, so we'll have, if you're on that back half of Notting Hill, it's getting paved the past week or so that you've got that going for you. It's
Sure.
It's going to be kind of like a racetrack out there, I'm sure, a little bit, with the kids on their scooters and the side-by-sides and golf carts and stuff.
There's nothing better than fresh asphalt, man. When they did Vaden over there, it's great.
Fresh asphalt, summertime, kids are out riding on it, enjoying it. Board meeting on Wednesday because of the July 4th holiday. The main thing, I mean, there's some little things here, bills that were paid, personnel hired, that sort of thing.
I think in the consent agenda, Ben, you have it in front of you there. Wasn't there something about the mud bugs, the date for the mud bug bash? Was on there?
Mud bug bash, Friday, April 19th, Saturday, April 20th. They'll be closing Panola Street for the mud bug bash for the Palmer home. So they will have that. We had that go on.
Great events.
Also, the Hernando High School Homecoming Parade, Thursday, October the 12th. So you can go ahead and put that on your schedule. That's always a really big one to have their allowing Haifa to use Kirkendall Park August through November at no charge, so kids can go out there and do their practices and all that sort of thing during the week. And then Hernando Elementary School, which I think we'll both have kids, Chad and I'll both have kids at Hernando Elementary this next year, July 27th, they're going to have a, what's it called? Popsicles in the Park back to school event at no charge from 6 p.m. to 7 p.m. on July 27th. So if you got kids, they're going to be at Hernando Elementary. You can go
why
there.
do I feel we'll both be there for the popsicles in the park? Sounds like.
I don't know. I know for sure I will be. That's also the same day as the Crew of Hernando Tee Off for Teachers golf tournament.
I may not be there then.
So I may be running a bit late to get there once we clean up from that event, but we'll get there when we get there. But the main thing that we had on this agenda was an approval for the East Parkway water plant upgrade. This was an ARPA project. The bid that was approved was $428,590 by Cleveland Construction. So that was approved. The state provided a 50% match from this, and I think we'll most likely be talking about that at some point with Lieutenant Governor Hosemann later. So only half of that number is going to be what you see paid for by the city of Hernando, but it's coming from federal ARPA funds. So it's really state and federal money. It's nothing that's coming out of the city's general fund.
Sure.
But that should provide some additional water resources for the East Parkway water plant. It was unanimously approved. Of course, I think just about everything on this agenda was unanimously approved. So kind of a short meeting, but we will have some lengthier meetings or a lengthy meeting coming up.
Should be time to start
18th.
looking up some of the budget information, and then also, I believe the mayor and told us, I think in the open meeting, that he's negotiating with our garbage vendor for our garbage contract. They've informed us that they will not honor the 3% increase, so we're going to look at some type of increase there, and so we have our city attorney and the mayor and the public works director Lee looking at that, and get us the best rate for the city.
We'll have to see what we can do there, but people definitely need to keep their eye on that because that's something that I know has been a sticking point for a lot of people because trash doesn't get picked up one week, or it's there's certain addresses in the city that for some reason have just become problem addresses. So that will definitely be part of the discussion. I have no doubt as we're negotiating that contract out. So we're certainly trying to advocate for you. But now we're going to transition to our interview portion. We have a big interview here with Lieutenant Governor Delbert Hosemann, and we'll be bringing him on now. And we're now joined by Mississippi Lieutenant Governor Delbert Hosemann, who is in his first term as Lieutenant Governor, previously served as Secretary of State, and I'm sure among many other positions. But those are the most notable and recent, and is now running for a second term as Lieutenant Governor. Lieutenant Governor Hosemann, thanks for joining us here on the Boardroom Podcast.
I am so excited to be here. We were in Hernando this morning and had breakfast with a bunch of people and got to talk about what goes on here in DeSoto County a lot, and then also what goes on in the state, which is really important. Sometimes you get isolated, and this is not South Memphis. This is Mississippi.
Absolutely.
And we are very proud of DeSoto County and all the cities that go here and the growth, phenomenal growth that's going on here. And, people want to come live here, and it's obvious. You like here in Hernando, you kept your small town feel, and big city economics is really special place. It's good to be here.
What we say is low taxes, safe schools, and safe neighborhoods. So
I know. It should be an easy recipe, but some parts of the country it's not, as you know, but it is here.
Well, some people may be familiar with your background, but walk us through your background a little bit much and how you ended up here where you are now.
Well, I grew up in Vicksburg, Mississippi, and up on Eagle Lake. And my people were from Yakima. I don't know if you can even spell that anymore. So we grew up there and did the normal things, went to school, played football, did all that kind of stuff. And then University of Notre Dame had lost to University of Southern California the year before, and it was on Sports Illustrated. And I got a Sports Illustrated, and I said, man, that'd be kind of a cool place. So I applied to Notre Dame And I guess for some geology diversity, they let me in. And I went up there, and the first time I'd ever seen the university was the day they dropped me off out front. I'd never been there like kids today go around and spend 2 or 3 looks at different universities. Well, I wasn't me. They dropped me off out there. And about a month later, it started snowing, and snow was over my head by about January. So it was a lot of culture shock. There was an interesting thing that happened there, Ben. When within the first week, they called me over and said, you need to do a lot of remedial work. And I said, really? Yeah. And he said, do we have you programmed for a 1.8 grade point average? I said, well, doesn't it take a 2 to graduate? I've only been here like a week, but I've seen the brochure. It takes 2 to graduate. Yes, sir, it does. But you're from Mississippi. Boy, that made me mad.
Yeah, I bet.
And you need to go do this, and you're going to do that. And I said, thank you so much for having me over and everything. That was very nice. And I walked out. I never went back. And when I graduated, I was on the Honor Society at the business school. So, whatever.
What do they know?
Nobody should ever limit you but yourself. And when we have our discussion, at DeSoto Central was real nice to have me speak at their senior graduation breakfast. And, there's hundreds of people, there are 1,000 people out there because y'all all participate. The reason your schools are so good, your parents and participate in them so much. Corey does a great job and whatnot. So, I talked to them about that they're the only person that should ever really restrict what you can achieve in life is sitting in your chair. And if you want to go do this or that or the other thing, dream big and go for it. And the other thing, of course, is to stay in Mississippi because we've got a great future here. Our economy is phenomenal. We're doing great things. So anyway, we'll talk about that a little bit later. But went from Notre Dame, came back, went in the Army like everybody else did at that point in time. I got 1 semester in law school before I had to go in the Army. So I had to come back to complete law school. And then I went, that was at University of Mississippi. Then I went to New York University for the master's in taxation. And I was basically a business lawyer and came back to Mississippi. And Lynn and I kid about that. We came back. Everything we owned was in the car, and we had a negative net worth. Let's put it that way. We owed more debt. We didn't have any assets. We had our TV in the back seat. That was most of it, and whatever clothes we had and everything was in the trunk and whatnot. And we got an apartment, and we had to take the car back because it was rented. I rented it to drive home from college. So I dropped it back at the airport. But we didn't have a car for a month. We had to ride into work with other people, hitchhike in, because we couldn't afford the down payment on a car. So in any event, we started like everybody else at ground zero. And I've been just so excited to be able to, we have 3 children and 8 grandchildren. Most of them live in Mississippi and are growing up here. And I'm just excited to be able to
I think one of your sons may have went to school with one of our other Aldermen, Natalie Lynch.
Yeah.
She mentioned that. So
lived across the street.
Yeah, okay.
And Natalie's great. She's doing a great job. Talked to her this morning.
Yeah,
actually.
yeah, she was there.
Yeah, great lady. So anyway, we came back and started work and built a law firm and a practice, just like a lot of other people do.
So during your time as Secretary of State, I know one thing that you have championed time and again is securing elections. Yeah. So when people see that, they may not know what that means. So what is that? What's behind that?
Well, when I started, one of the things I thought was important was that people that cast a ballot showed an ID. And that wasn't uniformly believed by the Democrats, I just tell you. So we fought, and I got the bill up 2 or 3 times before the House and the Senate. And maybe the House might pass one, and the Senate wouldn't do it. And so it died back and forth. So finally, we and a number of others did the constitutional amendment for voter ID. That turned out being to be real smart, and I'll tell you why in a second. We got a constitutional voter ID, and it was left to the Secretary of State, left to me to implement it. Well, as you know, every other state had gotten sued. Oh, Texas, South Carolina, and all of them had gotten sued. So I got in a plane, and I went up, flew commercial up to Washington, and went to the Department of Justice Civil Rights Division. And I sat in there with the head of the Civil Rights Division and about 4 or 5, 8 different lawyers with legal pads and me. And so I went into discussion. I said, we passed this Constitution. My people have voted on the constitutional amendment, passed with 72% of the vote or whatever. And we believe that, I can't remember exactly what the percentage was right now, but that 72 is another one. But anyway, it passed, and our people have decided that we're going to implement voter ID, and I want you to help me do that. They looked at me like I'd come from Mars. And so I said, and particularly, I don't want you to sue me. We'll work together on making sure this gets done. And they all wrote down stuff on there because, they had like a map on the wall. They sue Mississippi just for fun to start every day. Let's sue Mississippi and then we'll go sue something else. So I came back and we wrote the regulations, and I sent the regulations to them, said, here's our regulations. I want you to review these. We're going to implement voter ID. And shockingly, the Shelby case came out, which was a case that said that you couldn't look back on years of discrimination in determining whether a practice was discrimination currently. You had to look at current statistics about availability to cast a ballot and whatnot. Well, Mississippi had always been dragged down because we had years that we were not letting people vote. We had Jim Crow laws and all kinds of other stuff. So anyway, that came out, and so Texas said, we're not paying any more attention to the Department of Justice, and we're going on. And Eric Holder was he was United States Attorney under Obama, flew to Texas and sued Texas personally out there over their new idea on. I did exactly the opposite. The decision came out at 9. At 10 o'clock, I called the head of the Civil Rights Division. I said, that doesn't affect me any. I told you we were going to work together. You've got my regulations. I'd like your input. They sent back, they said, you ought to let university students vote with their ID. I said, that's a great idea. We'll put that in there. I can't get them to vote anyway. I thought that was wonderful. So I put that in there and a couple other minor changes. And we had an election coming in June. And about right at the end of April, I called Mr. Holder up there. Not Mr. Holder, the guy who was head of the Department of Civil Rights Division. I said, I haven't seen anything from you. And he said, well, we reviewed your regulations and everything, and we see I can remember the quote, we see no reason for the Justice Department to be in Mississippi. I said, I don't either, sir, and that would be fine. We were the only state that didn't get sued. South Carolina, Texas may still be sued. But we worked through that, and that was really one of the good things that people know about. But what I did, because as a business lawyer, I rewrote all the LLC laws and all the securities laws and all the corporate laws. And Mississippi has the best LLC laws in the country. When we started, there were probably 30,000 or so really LLCs around. And now I think there's over 200,000 of them. You look at the door coming into your building, you'll see the LLC names on there. And I got it where you can form an LLC basically for nothing. And your annual report is zero. And it protects you from liability. And I basically wrote the limited liability companies that I had been drafting in my professional practice. I wrote that form into law. And today it's still, now 15 years later, I guess it's really doing well. And that was really, I think the fact that we redid all of those was a really good accomplishment. And then we managed 16 section land, and I'll stop here. Some of we had 350,000 acres of timber. Several of them just had their timber management plan in crayon. I'm serious. I am dead serious. One of them hadn't cut trees in 125 years.
Wow.
You may have to explain to our listeners what 16 section land is. I know Ben knows what it is.
Yeah, you're right. That's a good point. Well, when we got the country, Thomas Jefferson said there's 36 sections in a township, and you'll see your township, of course, a section is a mile square, basically. And they said, you need to leave the 16th section alone, and we're going to do it for schools. And that was a great idea. The only thing is we didn't have the whole state. We got this in 1817. When we got that Treaty of Dancing Rabbit Creek, which brought, from the Indians, it brought us back from about Columbus to Tunica. And in there, they didn't keep the 16th section land. So you buy and sell 16th section land here in DeSoto County that would have normally gone for the schools. And had they kept that, the income level would be significant, but they didn't. So we had 62 counties with 16 section land. But what the state did is promise all of the counties that they would share the revenue, and we would make up the revenue they normally would have gotten on an average from all the other 62 counties. So DeSoto County gets probably about a $5 million check every year, even though they have no 16 section land. And I started managing the timber and whatnot, and we ended up raising over $1 billion during my term per schools, and sometimes over $100 million in a year. We had very good years, and that money all went into education, and that was a highlight, I thought, of I manage it like a business. And, if you were paying $1 an acre, we valued it, and you had to pay $5 an acre. And I got one note when I raised a hunting club from $2 to $5 an acre for their hunting rights. I got a note that said, "There's not enough orange for you to hunt in Carroll County." So I took that as a warning.
You don't hunt there, I don't guess.
So I didn't go hunting in Carroll County. But we raised a whole bunch of money for schools, and DeSoto County got huge checks every year, and it was very profitable.
That's right.
You mentioned education, and DeSoto County Schools is one of the largest employers in the county, definitely here in Hernando as well, with it being the county seat.
Yeah.
So talk a little bit about education going forward, what the plan is there, where you feel like the state can continue to improve.
Well, the first thing I had to do was get our teachers up to some kind of modicum of compensation. We were underfunded our teachers. So in our third year, we had a COVID year, so we couldn't get much done. But in our third year, we raised teacher salaries $1,000. And last year, we raised them by $245 million, and averaged about $5,000 per teacher. So we got our teacher beginning salaries up over Arkansas. I remember Sarah Huckabee Sanders and I had the ability to duck hunt before she got sworn in this year. And she was yelling at me she said, "You're putting a lot of pressure on me. Keep raising your teacher salary. I'm going to have to raise my teacher salary." And I thought, well, is this great? We got other ones trying to chase Mississippi finally. And so we got into that. That was job one. Then job two was to try to fund additional funds for what I call career coaches. Now, career coaches hadn't been funded ever before, and you've got them here now. And each one of them meets with they supplement the normal education process, and they talk with students about where you're going. Do you want to be HVAC, or do you want to be a graduate of the University of Mississippi, or do you want to go to a community college in Northwest, and what's your career path? Instead of just worrying about who you're going to take to the prom in senior year, where are you going? And what's your economics going to be? And if you do this, you can get this salary. And so those career coaches, we started with 80. I funded 140 this year. They're in about 60 districts around Mississippi, and they have assimilated. I was real pleased. I met with 5 of them the other day. They have assimilated themselves into the core curriculums of all of these schools, and they're giving some purpose to kids about taking dual credit, like at Northwest, to take some courses that you may go on to college, or some that you may do to do construction. There was a young man yesterday that's doing a construction advanced degree. So those are working out really, really well. Then the other thing you don't have here, we put $100 million extra this year, in addition to the teacher pay raise, $100 million into schools for making sure that it went directly to the classroom, not the principal's or superintendent's core salary or anything. This goes directly into the classrooms, and it will help them a lot, particularly with things like special needs kids, autistic kids, dyslexic kids, others that have the ability to have a meaningful life but haven't had really sufficient training and whatnot, and people to help them do that. So we started all of that, and it's been really good. What has happened is what I call the Corinth model. About 5 years ago, I started going to Corinth. They do semester schools, 9 weeks on, 3 weeks off, 9 weeks on, 3 weeks off. Keep Christmas and all that. And then in the summer, they have about 5 or 6 weeks. Those are called intercession periods. During the intercession period, the kids can come back to school. And in fact, in Gulfport, which has adopted this process as well, they had probably about 1,200 come back out of about 4,000 that were there during the summer. Now, these are kids that are in a learning environment, getting fed, and are in a safe environment. And they may not have been in that environment previously had this not been done. So you're seeing, I think, about 14 school districts have gone this way. Lamar County, Madison and Jackson, Madison County is going towards this process. Starkville. You're seeing a number of different counties go to this semester system. And what it's going to do, you get 180 days normally, but these intercession periods are extra. So you're in a learning environment, a safe environment, getting fed, and our kids are being brought up with additional, that may be cultural deals, it may be advanced, or if you were behind on a topic, you can go study up and catch up. I'm seeing that as a wave in education going forward. that's, a decision needs to be made by the parents and teachers everywhere. It may not work here because your school system's so great, but in other places, I'm seeing that in Mississippi be prolific.
I think San Antonio is going to that model, I think, starting here in August. So.
Yeah. And you'll see more and more of it. I'm not saying it ought to go here or not. Corey and all the parents and everybody will get together and do what's the best thing. You got a great education system. But in places that they have kids that may not have a lot of direction at home during the day, during off periods, this is very helpful.
What Ben and I talk about on the podcast is the DeSoto County bubble. So outside of DeSoto County, you see some of the areas of Mississippi that are struggling, like what you're talking about. I think maybe educational, and like you said, when you went off to Notre Dame, they thought you were a big old dummy from Mississippi. It sounded like so.
Maybe they might have been right. I don't know, but I got the degree.
Right, that's right. But hey, Notre Dame degree is pretty strong. So.
Yeah.
Anyway, do you want to talk about some of the more successes you've had as Lieutenant Governor and with the education system? I know I think recently there was a report came out, I think in the New York Times about kind of our increased.
We did. Yeah. We ended up finishing, I think, 27th in reading instead of being 50th all the time. We're on a roll. Before me, they did the third grade reading gate.
Yes, been very successful.
And it has been exceptionally successful. And now our kids are reading, which is, as you know, the base they're doing anything. And they're reading much better. We're emphasizing that. We are emphasizing now, since I started, we now have about 6,000 children in pre-K. In public pre-K. Those kids may not have been in anything, because you can do parochial wherever a parent thinks they ought to be, a Head Start or whatever. But the ones that didn't have an option like that, we put them in pre-K, and that gives them a year ahead to try to get to K, then try to get to first grade, second grade, third grade. So by the time they get to the third grade reading rate, they've been in school 5 years. And that makes a huge difference for us, I think. So those processes, I fully intend and expect that we'll have more kids in public pre-K in Mississippi as we go forward. That's very helpful, I think, to giving them a good running start on education.
Absolutely.
Well, I think so you have almost 40,000 students in the DeSoto County School District, largest school district in the state. Yeah. So you have a lot of parents in DeSoto County, I think, as well. And, as a parent, you obviously want better for your kids than what you had and that sort of thing. But also, I think there's a movement with parents to have their kids come back to their home state or their home community or back to their hometown. We had Shad White on, our state auditor, old buddy of ours from our Ole Miss days.
Yeah.
And he talked about brain drain in Mississippi and people graduating from state schools, and then they, leave to go somewhere else where they feel like there's better opportunity.
Yeah, Nashville, Florida, Texas.
So what can be done from that perspective? You feel like with the state moving forward, what can be done on the brain drain in Mississippi, keeping our most talented students here?
Well, the part that they're educated is the most important part, the fact that they're coming out of school here. When I spoke at that breakfast for DeSoto Central, of course, you got Hernando, you got all these others, but when I spoke, I'll go around and talk to the kids, young men and women. What are you doing? What are you going to do? Where are you headed? And all this other. Very articulate, all got a plan. I mean, I was just really impressed with that. So to your point, how you come back? And so I talked about that during my talk to them. Make sure you come back to Mississippi when you're here. But to do that, we need to do these things. We need to have a good education system. You need to have a safe environment. This year, we got 2 assistant DAs for DeSoto County to prosecute people. Y'all got one special one that nobody else got, and put it that way.
Bob Morris told me to mention they started on Monday, so he's excited about that.
And I was excited to have him there. And everybody needs a speedy trial. And if you get convicted, you need to go sit in Parchman for a while. Right. This year, we did mandatory sentencing, like for carjacking. I did that bill. So that if you carjack somebody, you go to prison. You need to go sit for 5 to 10 years, mandatory, and be fleet policeman and cause bodily injury. We did several mandatories. I anticipate some more next year. I want to make sure that people when they're in that part of what I call the cone of criminality. You start with stealing somebody's lawnmower and you don't get caught, you do this, or you maybe do street drugs or something. But when they start in an armed, getting in your car with you with a gun, the next thing, somebody dies. Maybe them, maybe you, maybe somebody they don't even intend to. So I want to take them out of that and go sit them down for at least 5 years from that period, let them think about what they're doing with their lives. So we are doing that, and we intend to continue to do that. And I'm excited to, The second thing is they have to have an economic opportunity. Now, the DeSoto County schools got $7 million of that $100 million that we set aside this year. Went up here. And when you're teaching kids to do a lot of different things, like the career coaches, you may be an expert electrician, and there's a bunch of jobs for electricians. So you get a chance to have a responsible amount of income and work where you have an economic future. I think that's important. You look at all of these places that are depositing themselves, Sophia, look at all of these ones that are going out in Marshall County and Tate now, just expanding out of DeSoto. That will offer the economic side. So you get a safe environment, you get a good education system, then you get an economic environment. And those are flowering here. So we have a process. Jim Flanagan and I and David Romsbarger wrote something called MFLEX. MFLEX is where we took all of our economic development packages and we put them in one thing that you can compute in about 5 minutes if you'll tell me what your capital expenses are going to be and what your average compensation for your employees will be. I can outline what your tax breaks would be. That's been a major part in acquiring the aluminum mill that we acquired in Columbus, the largest one in the country now, I think. All of those things have come out of this MFLEX. So we're doing the economic development to make sure people come here. So I think those things are, and all of those are in motion here. I mean, I'm not just trying to be nice about it.
But we just did Ben and I did it. Well, the city did a ribbon cutting on the AWG warehouse here in Hernando. $300 million investment in our town. So
yeah, you're gonna run out of property.
We need some 16-section land.
No, but I do think managing growth is a good thing. You've got a good leadership team here at Board of Supervisors, and they all work together. They've got that group that all gets together. I think. Yeah,
the council of mayors. We all have. We've had Mark Gardner on here, and we all have a great relationship. Hernando, South Haven, Olive Branch, we all work well together. We go to these conferences and all kind of hang out, and everybody gets along great. And so it really works out good. It's very helpful because when y'all come down to see us, when Mark and Lee and all of y'all, or I come up here a lot to the Council on Governors myself, I've been to several. Sometimes we Zoom talk in with y'all. What we need from you is the number one priority. This is what we need up here. And then once I get an indication of what that is, which y'all are good about being unified on, this time it was I-55, so we put 25. We got I-55 moved up to where it is now on the radar to be completed. It starts, I think, in 25. They're doing right away and utility, a bunch of stuff they got to do before they can get there. But we put up $25 million. Now next year we'll put up 25 or 50 million more, and the next year when you get started, we'll have 75 or 100 million in the bank. Hopefully the federal government will put up, we have a match on a lot of these federal programs where we have to put up 20%. If we say if we match 50%, maybe we'll go ahead of everybody else. But regardless, we're going to end up expanding the I-55 corridor. And the other one that the mayor and I and the city council, Natalie, all of us climbed under the bridge at Hernando. Well, this is a Hernando-based podcast, so we're real interested in the Hernando intersection. So.
That moved way up on the list, and I've talked with Commissioner Caldwell, because you're lucky because you got one that lives right here, about making that a priority for us, because the growth is here. It's not going away. It's only going to get worse. It's dangerous. Parts of the concrete are falling out from underneath, where it washes out up there, because I crawled up there and looked at it.
Sure.
So I think you'll see a push this year to have that be a priority for MDOT. And, they get, I think we funded them with about $2.2 billion last year, and it's expensive to do anything anymore. I don't know what that intersection over prize at. John will be able to tell us, but
I think it's about a $40 million project.
If it's $40 million, I'm gonna be thrilled.
Okay.
Because all the other bids I'm getting on everything else are astronomical.
Sure.
But that would be much more achievable if it's only $40 million. Say only, my goodness.
Yes, yeah.
You used to get $1 million.
Times have changed, haven't they?
$1 million a mile. Well, now we're lucky if we get $20 million a mile.
Sure.
We did 7 miles south of Jackson, Mississippi before I got there. We did 7 miles to Florence, and it's $250 million.
We went to MML this last weekend, the conference down there. I think you were down there. And anyway, I drove down 49. I think that's the first time I've ever drove down there. There was no construction cones anywhere. It was all done. So.
It took them, I don't know. I just remember I was a child when they started, so whatever.
We're talking infrastructure and economic development with Lieutenant Governor Delbert Hosemann, and in talking about it, there's people that are really lucky, like Chad, that live here and don't have to necessarily travel I-55 very often. And there's people like myself and my wife. We go to Memphis almost every single day, so we have to deal with I-55 traffic constantly, and have to sit in it and that sort of thing. But the mayor of South Haven's mentioned that he feels like not having I-55 expanded is inhibiting economic development. But at the same time, DeSoto County is leading in a lot of ways in terms of economic development. So do you agree with that assessment that it's kind of a little restrictive?
Time has a value. You used to bill by the hour. I mean, a lot of people still bill by the hour. Time has a value. For every minute you sit there, you're not productive. I mean, you can get on the cell phone sometimes, but you bump into the guy in front of you. So we ask you not to do that. But time has value. So the value, the time that hours and hours that people sit on that highway, whether they're not working or not earning a living or not doing other things, has a cost involved with it. I'm not sure about how it affects South Haven or whatever. You have to talk to Darren about that. But I do know that when people are sitting in a line that's not moving for hours on end, that's an economic loss to the state of Mississippi because they're not being productive.
And Chad and I went to Washington, D.C. earlier this year to ask Cindy Hyde-Smith and Roger Wicker for additional support for the I-55 expansion and project. And I think the thought process is that there's so much truck traffic on it that bringing in, whether it's warehouses, bringing in new business or whatever, that it just simply cannot. It's become less and less functional, and I think that's what they mean in terms of straining economic development.
Yeah, I mean, I think that I-55 project is going to, I believe, 8-lane it from Goodman Road to Hernando, I believe, something like that. I'm not 100% sure, but that would be a tremendous. The bottlenecks right there. There's a lot of accidents that shut the road down almost on a daily basis, and so.
So how were you received with? I don't want to throw Cindy and Roger under the bus, but it sure would be helpful if they gave us a little money.
Well, we learned that Cindy is now on the subcommittee for appropriations, and so she was very positive about what she could do for us. So we were excited about that.
Our goal was to meet the match to start with. That's why I put that $25 million aside this year and $25 next year. So if they had a match like a 70-30 or 80-20 or something, we'd already have our match set aside, so we have no holdback. But eventually, we may end up having to pay for all of ourselves. Roger and Cindy have worked their way up in the seniority system up there, so I'm hopeful that they'll be able to get an allocation or a match of some sort, and that's why we need to keep funding towards 2025. So if they say they have a match, then
that's probably our biggest need, and also I think the sewer project in South Haven, Horn Lake areas is probably the biggest.
I have been on that for at least 3 years. Yeah. I have talked to the lawyers involved in that. I've read the pleadings. I have talked to the mayors. Last year, we put $10 million for planning aside just for that, for Horn Lake and them. I am convinced that we have lost the case and that at some point in time, they're going to give us a deadline.
Sure.
Like you have to be off by X. And also a very real probability or possibility would be that they raised the rates to like $5 a gallon or something.
I think the city of Memphis already raised them a little bit, but they just don't want us on our DeSoto.
That's right. And under that litigation, in talking with one of the lawyers, and I have to confirm with him, the mayors can do this, but one of them was talking about that since we're on their system, they can approve what our economic developments would be.
Yeah.
But and you know what that would mean? We don't get anything.
That's right. Yeah.
So because it would overflow their system or whatever, so they're just not going to do that. That disaster is looming on us, and we put $10 million aside. I pushed that out of the Senate side, and we were able to push it out. We need a number. Dracua and them need to decide if they're going to let them in or not, or you're going to have to build your own. I mean, there are decisions to be made, but those decisions really should be reached before January.
Yes.
Because that's when we go back into session, and if you're going to need X dollar, $200 million or whatever it's going to cost, then you start just like we had. We put $10 million aside to do the planning, so then we put some money aside to do that. When I did that $10 million for up here, I got a lot of pushback from other cities.
Sure.
Why didn't you do that for us? And my response was, well, because you're not going to have your water cut off. These people are going to be either put out of business economically or physically.
Yeah.
And so it's a disaster, and I considered it that we should start putting money aside to fix it. And we will put money aside again next year. We just need to get a plan A is, and I trust the judge. You've got good people on the crew board. You've got good mayors, and y'all all get along on stuff. So,
Governor, I think one thing we got to talk about is some of the things you've been able to address as far as the state's debt and cutting the spending and so forth, cutting the size of government down.
We did that. I talked about running the state like a business. Most people kind of laughed. I got a call about a month ago from the head of personnel, and he said, Governor, you said you were going to run it like a business, but this is a direct quote, the blue state never thought you would do that, but now they do. When we started in the last 4 years, we have reduced the number of PINs or positions that you can hire for by 5,700. Through attrition, not firing anybody, but through attrition and just being smart about what we do, we've reduced the actual number of employees by 2,300 state employees, over 10%, right at 10% of the state employees have not been, as attrition came when we didn't rehire for the position. And we took the positions away that I told you, 5,000 of them. That led us to being able to raise the salaries of the ones that are here. They were averaging in like 34, 36, and we got them up over 40,000. So they'd be competitive and we want to keep the ones that are working, and we want to make it competitive. In addition to that, in addition to a $525 million tax cut, we paid off $500 million in debt. We paid off 12% of the state's debt. And we didn't borrow any money in the last 2 years, and we're not going to borrow any money next year. And we have about $700 million in our rainy day fund and about $500 million, I think, in our wind pool. I'll have to look back and see how much they've got in there now. But in any event, we have actual cash. This year, we're probably at $600 million. So we've been able to downsize and right-size government and been able to spend that money on education infrastructure, and I don't have to send $40 or $50 million a year in interest to New York City. I'm putting it back in DeSoto County.
I bet there's not many states that can say that today.
I don't think there's any, and because California is $32 billion short. We've cut taxes and we paid off debt and we shrunk the size of government. We're doing infrastructure and you name it. If you looked at what I consider a conservative playbook, everything in there we're doing. We're stopped ballot harvesting. We're starting purging on voter rolls. You hadn't voted in 2 presidential elections, and we've shrunk the size of government. We paid off debt. We've cut taxes. All of those things that you kind of dream about for our state, we're doing. We're accomplishing those.
And just a little politics. Conservative really didn't take over the legislature, 2012 essentially. So we've all done this in about 10 years.
That's exactly right. And kudos to Tate and Philip Gunn, who were there before me, and of course Governor Bryant. But we picked up that ball, and now it's accelerated. They got us past the 50-yard line, and now, man, we're in the go zone.
Yeah,
we're in the red zone here. Other states, we got a favorable article in the New York Times about education and the Mississippi Miracle and that kind of stuff. But that's all true. I've talked to other governors, other heads of RNC, the whole Republican group. I was on the drafting committee for President Trump 4 years ago. I did the economics part of his platform. I wrote that with another gentleman that ran Hardee's. We went up to Washington and stayed 2 or 3 days and wrote the platform for the Republican Party. And I will tell you, all of that was like a dream. Could we ever do this? It's like Reagan's, seeing a shining light out there or something. But we've done that. We are there, and we are powerful. We're going to have a great year next year, and we're going to continue to reduce taxes and educate children and build infrastructure, and it's just really good right now. And it didn't come easy. There were tough votes by my senators and members of the House, but they took them, and here you are, man. It's producing.
There's some big numbers in there, and let's talk about reducing taxes, because I think for a lot of folks, they see it as kind of like their household budget. We've made a lot of cuts. Things are headed in the right direction as far as paying off debt and those sort of things. Well, then at what point can taxpayers say, when will I see a reduction in my personal income tax? Because I think that's the big
this
thing.
year, obviously. It's this year. They did away with the 5% rate. We did. And then it goes to 4.7, then 4.4, and then 26 will be 4%. So every year your rate will go down, and you'll see less income taxes from Mississippi. And as part of that, Ben, this past year, I passed a bill. I helped draft it and passed by the Senate. I don't get to vote in the Senate, contrary to popular thought. I'm just a referee down there. But I do have some influence. And we got a bill passed that you can write off 100% of every capital expense this year. Now, that means a guy like the ones we were talking to that are asphalt people, they go buy an asphalt machine for $1 million. Instead of amortizing it over 10 years, they can write it off this year. And I'm doing that because two reasons. One, we want them to buy the new machine. Second, that means they're going to hire 2 or 3 people to run it and maintain it, so increase the job performance. Third, the thing keeps getting more and more expensive every year anyway, so I want them to buy now, not get it into inflation, which ends up costing me, the taxpayers, money. And then lastly, I get my money back, in later years. It's kind of the deferral, really. You get a write-off right now versus over the next 5 years. Well, next year you don't get a write-off for that equipment. So we start to get our money back over the next 4 years. It's well worth it, and it has been I've gotten rave reviews about being able to go spend money on what they call CapEx, which would be a dump truck or a computer or whatever.
Yeah, every business has some kind of CapEx budget, whether it's you're looking at lighting or there's some kind of bigger projects that you need done, conveyor belt system through a distribution center or something like that. There's always those big expenses that are in a budget like that for a business. But we've talked about economic opportunity, teacher pay raises, brain drain, reducing taxes, all the stuff that the political folks that listen to our show want to hear about. Let's talk for the folks that don't know you as a person as much. This is a question that we ask a lot of our guests. Has there been a moment where you're the lieutenant governor, you're the secretary of state, and you're in a moment where, man, this is a cool moment that I'm sitting in history, or there's some sort of historical aspect to your job that you've just said, this is neat to be here and be this person in this moment?
A couple, and I'll shorten the story some. I started complaining about people don't vote. The military doesn't get to vote. So we had a system now where you can vote electronically if you're in the military anywhere in the world. And I was complaining about that. So the Department of Defense called me and said, come to Washington and send me your passport and dress for a warm environment. And I ended up in Iraq, Kuwait first, and then Iraq, and then in Afghanistan. And I was out at the base north of Kabul, and then later in Kabul, meeting with all of these men and women, getting them to cast their ballot and showing them how they could send their ballot in, and it'd go to the Hernando box just like they were standing there. I thought that was something really important. Part of that trip that I remember, in addition to meeting a whole bunch of people and whatnot, I landed at the hospital back in Frankfurt on the way back home, and they let me go around the hospital. Now, this is where they bring the wounded warriors within 24 hours of when they were shot in Afghanistan or Iraq, they would be at this hospital. And they would fly them back to Dover or wherever from there. But this was where they triaged, did the preliminary, and got them stabilized and everything. And these young men, when you see them in an Army uniform with a helmet on and Kevlar and all that stuff, they look like these big, tough kids. Well, when you see them laying in a bed, they look like my son. And so I roamed around the hospital, and I went into a room where there was one man in bed, and he was wrapped from his hip all the way to his ankle. And he had obviously been shot or one of the things had exploded on his leg or whatever. And I went in and said to him, how you doing? Fine, sir. They treating you all right here? Yes, sir. Any problems? No, sir. Just as cold, as quick as anything. So I can remember this. You talk about moments, and I'll tell you about this one. So I thought, I need to get out of here. This guy's obviously struggling here and doesn't want to necessarily talk with me or somebody. So I got to the door, and I turned around and walked back over there. And I said, son, are you okay? And he said, sir, my men need me. I need to go back. And it was just dead silence in that room. And I was, just arm's length away. I touched like his shoulder like that, leaning over. And I was just stunned by that. And there was a long pause, maybe not, I don't know if it seemed like long. And I said, son, you need to come home and run your country. You've done your part. And it seemed to have a good effect on him. You could see his facial change a little bit. Like it was okay. He wouldn't abandon these brothers in arms and whatnot. It was okay. And that's one I think, I don't know, if I never did anything else, that'd be important.
Yeah, that's a great story. That's a great story. I can see how that would affect you for sure.
Oh, yeah. I still get choked up thinking about it. And I know I'm so hopeful that man is back running this country somewhere. It just, war and having our young people like that is we have PTSD come back here. There's an Operation Bonfire that I help with, and where we get people back to talk and whatnot. But there's a lot of kids that went over there, young men and women, that come back. I went back again to Kuwait with the 155th 2 years ago, maybe 3 years ago, and they've invited me, hopefully, to go back to Kuwait again with them, stage out from Kuwait this year. Hopefully I'll have a chance to go back with our military over there again.
So we're sitting here with Lieutenant Governor Delbert Hosemann. He is running for his second term as Lieutenant Governor, and just like any political race, there's always some points of contention, I guess, if you will. And I'm sure that you're not immune to hearing all this stuff. But so how do you respond? I know that your opponent has brought up some things. He's called you a Democrat straight up, which I don't think you are. I think you're
I was
a
on
Republican.
a Republican candidate for Congress in 1998, and I have been a member of the Republican Platform Committee, and I wrote President Trump's jobs in the economy portion. We've been, I would say, heavily involved in Republican politics. So,
but I think that anybody that has a Facebook or any kind of social media in DeSoto County has probably seen the commercial out there. And I know you don't write your commercials, but saying that your opponent has just not shown up, and that his record of attendance is probably one of the things that has been most concerning, and not showing up for DeSoto County. How does that kind of factor into to this race, and how do you think people respond to that?
Well, it's kind of hard to hide from your record. My record of all the things we've talked about, from tax reform to $7 million for DeSoto County schools this year, to teacher pay raises, to infrastructure, all of that, and ballot elections, mandatory sentencing. I got an assistant DA I've got a long record with DeSoto County, putting money aside for I-55, money aside to try to save us from when Memphis cuts us off. I've got a long record up here. My grandfather and mother grew up in Memphis at 3825 Poplar Avenue. So I've been coming here since the 50s, and I've watched it grow, and I'm very positive. My opponent hasn't had a bill passed in at least the last 8 years, and during those times he was chairman of elections and chairman of the environmental committee for the Senate as a Republican chairman, and I never had a bill passed. And so people can look at his record, and the good news about here is you've got a well-educated populace. They got my record. They can compare it to his record, which pretty much doesn't exist, and decide which way they want to go. I don't want people to fall victim to just rhetoric. They need to fall victim to results. I got a record. If you don't like it, that's fine. And if you don't want to decrease taxes and buy public education and do infrastructure, that's fine. You can disagree on those things. But in his case, he really doesn't have any platform other than whatever. It's all hyperbole.
And this is another thing we ask often when we've talked to candidates. So when folks in DeSoto County, they're going to have to make a decision in August. They're gonna step into that polling place. What is the biggest thing, the most important thing you want them to remember about the lieutenant governor's race when casting their vote?
Well, the first thing I think you always need to think about is your local. Which of these candidates has actually performed for DeSoto County? Who has a record of achieving everything from education to infrastructure? Who comes up here a lot? Who has a lot of people that work with him and the supervisors, and you can talk to any of them, Mark or anybody else you want to, who has a record. That's the first thing, because most of the time, your previous record is what you're going to do in the future. And I'm committed to finish I-55. I'm committed to find that we can have our own water and sewer without when we get cut off from Memphis. Committed to having the best education system here in Northwest Community College. Met with them this morning. Committed to a lot of things that we have been doing that we will go forward to in the future. That's the first thing. Then the second thing you have to look at is what's best for the state. And when you start talking about somebody that's actually paid off debt and shrunk the size of government, and the state's in the best financial condition it's ever been, which will allow us to do the things we need to do up here, that's a pretty strong record. And I would encourage everybody to look at that. We have a vision for the future in Mississippi. I know where we need to go, and I fully intend to take us there. I've got 8 grandchildren. I'm at a position I want to make sure that they can live their lives here and raise their families here and be economically successful here. And that's where we're going to take the state of Mississippi, and obviously this county is probably our fastest growing one in the whole state. But we're going to take the whole state to a place that they will be financially viable and our kids will stay home.
I got one more question. I think you've been so generous with your time. I appreciate it. But I think it's important to talk again about taxes with a guy who's got a master's in tax law. So, we've heard the grocery tax. We need to eliminate the grocery tax. And also, again, where do you see us going forward as far as, I know y'all have made some huge cuts with the income tax. Do you see a full elimination of that in the future? Or,
yeah, we're at about 1.6 or 1.8 billion in income tax, and about 400 million in the grocery tax.
Yes.
It'll come up next year about which one to decrease, or which one or both to decrease. We'll look at the budget here beginning in September. We'll set our budget in December coming into the session. So we'll kind of know what money we've got that we can start the reduction on. I'm anxious to see the debate on whether or not you accelerate more the actual taxes themselves, the income tax, or start to address the grocery tax. Many of these states, and the rumble is around the Capitol, which doesn't mean it's factual. It just means it's the first discussions I'm hearing, are that you would take certain parts of groceries out.
Sure.
Like meat and whatever, and you'd either lower it or do away with that, like vegetables or something. You'd start where maybe beer wouldn't be taken out or something, but there are people starting to carve into the grocery tax as to what is included or excluded from, and some of that's already done, excluded from the process, or just a simple reduction like we did 3/10, 4/10 to get 1%, so you could see us go 7 to 6.7, 6.5, start a gradual decrease.
And do you want to talk about why, because we have a group of people here in DeSoto County who are running on this, I've called the far right-wing platform, and they have their opinion, which is fine. I just disagree with it. But how reckless it would be just to go down there and just cut away all that revenue without any type of long-term plan. As far as grocery tax,
their first long-term plan was to raise the sales tax by 2.5%. So that's why do you think people from Memphis come down here to shop? Because it's 2.5% cheaper by just getting down here. The second thing is those two equal $2.2 billion, which is about what we put in education.
Sure.
So you can eliminate education and the income tax and the grocery tax in 1 year. I don't think we need to do that. It is totally reckless for people to say, well, we're just going to eliminate the income tax. Even the ones that were proposed before eliminated it in like 2036.
Sure.
And they raised the taxes by 2.5%. So it was a ruse. They were going to raise your taxes and lower this income.
Yeah, well, I think it's just political rhetoric. We're going to go down there and cut your taxes, and that's just not the truth of the matter.
It's not. And the way to do this is run it like a business and do gradual reductions. We actually, at 4/10, we will eliminate the income tax if we stay on this project before they would have. And we never have raised anybody's taxes. So you just need to do the prudent thing, just like you normally do. Anybody runs a business. We decrease the number of employees, we decrease our overhead, we pay off our debt, we decrease our income taxes in a gradual way that's sustainable.
Sure.
Now you go do this. You remember Kansas tried that one time.
Sure.
They had to have everybody back in an emergency session. In Texas this year, the Texas legislature is meeting to do $12.2 billion back to the counties because the ad valorem taxes on homes is so expensive. It's like 1.8%, climbing to 2 probably. So every home out there that used to be worth $250 now is worth $750, and their taxes are $1,500. So it's running them through the roof. Well, they have an income tax, but they can't afford to live in a house. Yeah. So all of this balances out. In a normal thing, our tax rates here for real property are less than half of that. And I don't want people to get where they can't have a house. So this gradual reduction by decreasing the size of government, being prudent about paying off debt, and we don't have to pay interest, those kind of things allow us to keep our rates low for the counties. For example, you eliminate that tax, what's going to happen to this county? They're going to raise your real property taxes.
Well, a concern that I have being an alderman is the cities get diversion from the sales tax. So if
100%.
you eliminate that completely, that would really affect the city of Hernando's budget.
Yeah,
really
if we eliminate the income tax, you wouldn't have any money for education. So you need to go find a way to give Corey Wilson, I'm sorry, the former employee, Corey Wilson.
He was my basketball coach.
Yeah,
But he won't claim that, though.
Give him how many ever millions of dollars, $100 million it takes to raise that. It'd have to be out of your regular taxes. And I don't think anybody here wants to do that. I think that'd be reckless. You just need to pay attention, y'all. There's no nirvana here. It's good, hard work every year doing better. And we're doing that right now.
And again, the Republican Conservative Party has only really been in control of our legislature since 2012. And look what we've accomplished. We need to keep moving in that direction, in my opinion.
Yeah, we're the envy of all these other states.
Sure.
They all want to know how you did that. So, like I was saying, I had a call the other day from a former chairman of the RNC, and they're all talking about Mississippi. I said, well, y'all take a look, man.
We have covered a lot in the last.
One more question. This is a funny
Chad,
question.
he's always got one more question.
I'm a runner. I know you're a runner. We got to get Ben running. We try to get him to run.
I would love for Ben to run. I did the New York
something
Marathon
has to
and
be
all that
chasing
stuff.
me.
Yeah, something has to be chasing him, and it doesn't need to be something from a restaurant. Y'all, we did really good this year on something that you haven't covered, which is the match. When we got our money from American Rescue Plan money, we said if the cities and the counties would put their money in a match, you did that. And it came up, I think the total was about $75 million went to water and sewer. In Hernando, you got $1.8 million for the wastewater. You got another $826,000 for wastewater. You got another $128,000 for wastewater. I'm already at $3 million. Then you got $600,000 more for a drinking water project and $241,000 more. When you add all of that up, you're talking about over $3-4 million.
Just at our meeting we had it on Wednesday because of the holiday, but we just that $241,000 project, we just approved that to go out for bid. So that's going to be working on here very quickly.
Yeah, I was so, and I'm not saying this because both y'all sitting here. I'm so proud of y'all for doing that. You could have blown that money off somewhere, but the legislature did its fiscal part. We said, we're going to hold our money back and match you if you'll put your money up. Y'all did that. And now those things last forever. I mean, you're talking about.
Well, that's going to be a water treatment plant that we're working on for East Parkway there.
Right.
That's going to be a big deal for us to keep economic development on that side of the town there.
Well, the state stepped in. You made good decisions. Yes. We made good decisions. That's what I'm talking about. People don't see a whole lot of that, but it will allow y'all to continue to grow here. And that money would have gone, we couldn't have found it, but we did the right thing. Totally, we ended up matching $491 million for cities. Absolutely. So almost $1 billion went into water and sewer that you would have never seen before. And you're not the only one. South Haven did the same thing in Olive Branch and Horn Lake. You got good leadership here. Sure. But that money that we decided to match turned out to be $1 billion positive decision.
Sir, well, we appreciate you having you on the show. And
it's good to see you.
Have any last words?
No, I'm just glad to be here. It's a wonderful day in Hernando. You got traffic problems. Isn't this horrible?
That's what we got. So thank you.
All right, that was Lieutenant Governor Delbert Hosemann. He joined us for a great little visit here in the SRP studios. Chad, that's all we got for this week, and we will be back in a couple weeks with another guest, and we'll have that for y'all soon here. But keep on listening to the Boardroom Podcast. I'm Ben Piper.
I'm Chad Wicker. Thank you.
Thanks for listening.
Thank you for joining us for an episode of the Boardroom Podcast, presented by People for a Better DeSoto County. I hope we were able to inform you and give you some additional insight on how your local government works. Stay engaged. Local government is the closest to the people.